The first thing I saw that morning was water crawling across my backyard like it had a mind of its own. It was not a puddle. It was a slow, brown sheet of stormwater pushing over my grass, circling my patio chairs, and creeping toward the back door of my garage. The rain had stopped hours earlier, but my yard was still filling up. Then I saw why. The drainage ditch behind my property was gone. The narrow channel that had carried stormwater safely along my lot for years had been packed with fresh soil, white gravel, and 3 little decorative shrubs. Right where water was supposed to flow, the HOA had built a landscaping strip. Before I could even speak, Martin Keller, the HOA president, pulled up in his white SUV with 2 board members behind him. "This is why we fixed that eyesore," he snapped, pointing at my flooded yard. "Your property was dragging down the neighborhood." I stared at him. "You filled a drainage easement." He laughed. "We improved the appearance. You should be thanking us." "That ditch is on my property," I said, "and it connects to the county stormwater system." His smile disappeared. "This neighborhood is moving forward, whether you like it or not." But behind him, water was already backing up toward the higher lots. He did not notice it yet. I did. And within a week, that same man would be standing ankle-deep in his own backyard, watching a county inspector place a violation notice on his fence while half the neighborhood stared from the sidewalk. I was not the kind of person who went looking for fights with the HOA. Before all of this happened, I was the neighbor who waved from the driveway, kept my trash cans hidden, mowed my lawn on time, and paid every assessment before the due date. I did not argue at board meetings. I did not post angry messages online. I just wanted to live quietly in the small house I had worked almost 15 years to afford. My home sat near the back of the subdivision, where the road curved downhill into a quiet cul-de-sac. It was not one of the large houses near the clubhouse with stone columns and perfect lawns. Mine was older, smaller, and simple. But to me, it meant everything. I bought it after my divorce. When my life felt unstable and temporary, that house was the first place that felt like mine again. I painted the kitchen myself, rebuilt the back steps with my brother, and planted 2 crepe myrtles by the fence because my mother used to have them outside her bedroom window. The drainage ditch behind the yard had always been there. It was not pretty, but it worked. It ran along the back edge of my lot and connected to a county storm drain near the lower road. During heavy rain, water from the upper lots flowed through that ditch instead of pooling around foundations, patios, and garage doors. When I bought the house, the closing attorney pointed it out in the documents. The survey showed a marked drainage easement across the rear of my property. The county records made it clear that no one was supposed to block it, fill it, or change its grade without approval. So I left it alone. I trimmed the grass around it. I cleared leaves from it every fall. It was not glamorous, but it protected my house, and it protected several houses uphill from me too. For years, nobody cared. That changed when Martin Keller became HOA president. Martin lived on the high side of the neighborhood in one of the biggest homes overlooking the retention pond. He talked constantly about property values, curb appeal, and bringing the community up to standard. At first, most of us thought he was just enthusiastic. Then the notices started coming. People got warnings for faded mulch, old flower pots, basketball hoops, patio umbrellas, and fence stains barely visible from the street. Martin wanted everything uniform, clean, and expensive. What he really meant was that anything practical, old, or inconvenient had to disappear. My drainage ditch became one of those things. The first time he mentioned it, he stopped his SUV by my mailbox and said the board had received concerns about my backyard. I told him calmly that the ditch was a recorded drainage easement, not a landscaping choice. He smiled like I had misunderstood my own property. "Everything in this community affects everyone else," he said. That sentence stayed with me because, in his mouth, it did not sound like community. It sounded like control. Still, I tried to avoid trouble. I emailed the HOA office a copy of the survey, highlighted the easement, and explained that the ditch connected to county drainage. I thought that would end it. For a while, it did. Then the board announced a new neighborhood beautification initiative. They wanted cleaner sightlines, decorative landscaping, and a more upscale appearance around rear lots. The language sounded harmless, but the ditch behind my property was exactly the kind of thing Martin hated: useful, legal, and unattractive. I kept telling myself no one would be foolish enough to touch a drainage easement. I was wrong. And before this story goes any further, If you have ever dealt with an HOA that treated your private property like a community decoration, share your thoughts in the comments. Too many homeowners only learn how important their documents are after someone with a title and too much confidence decides to ignore them. The real trouble started on a Tuesday morning, while I was at work. At 9:14, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the backyard camera. I opened the app, expecting to see a delivery driver or maybe a deer near the fence. Instead, I saw a landscaping crew behind my property with shovels, bags of white gravel, and a compact loader rumbling across the grass. At first, I thought they were working on the common area. Then the loader dropped its first scoop of dirt directly into my drainage ditch. I sat at my desk, frozen, watching strangers erase a legal easement one bucket at a time. I called the HOA office immediately. No one answered. I left a message saying the crew was on my property and needed to stop. Then I emailed the board, attached the survey again, and wrote clearly that the drainage easement could not be altered without county approval. No one replied. By the time I got home, the ditch was gone. The back edge of my yard looked strangely smooth, like someone had painted over a crack and hoped nobody remembered it had been there. White gravel glittered where stormwater used to run, and 3 small shrubs stood in a neat row on top of a buried problem. Martin Keller appeared at my side fence before I even finished taking pictures. He did not apologize. He did not ask permission. He smiled. "Looks much better, doesn't it?" he said. "You sent a crew onto my property and filled my drainage ditch. The board authorized landscape improvement along visible rear lot areas," he said. "That was a drainage easement. That was an eyesore." I told him again that the ditch was on my survey and connected to the county stormwater system. He shrugged. Like, written records were just old suggestions. "You homeowners always think one little line on a piece of paper makes you special," he said. "This is a community. Your yard affects everyone's property value." "My yard was functioning," I said. "You just blocked stormwater." His face hardened. "No, we corrected a neglected area, and if standing water becomes a problem because you failed to maintain your lot, that will be addressed too." No, we corrected a dying end. 2 days later, the rain came. It was not a historic storm, just a long, steady spring rain. Normally, water rushed through the ditch and disappeared toward the storm drain. This time, I heard nothing. By evening, my backyard had turned into a shallow pond. Water spread across the grass, gathered around the patio, and pushed against the garage slab. The new gravel strip acted like a dam. Water reached it, slowed, pooled, and turned back toward my house. The next morning, there was a wet line across the garage floor. A box of old family photos had soaked up moisture from the concrete. The bottom shelf of my tool cabinet had started to rust. The smell of damp drywall hit me as soon as I opened the door. I sent photos to the HOA. Their response came 6 hours later. It was a violation notice. According to the board, my property had visible standing water, poor drainage maintenance, and unsightly saturated turf inconsistent with community standards. They gave me 10 days to correct the issue or face daily fines. They filled the ditch. They caused the flooding. Then they fined me for having water in my yard. When I called Martin, he answered on speakerphone. "You need to withdraw that notice," I said. "The notice stands. You caused the standing water." "No," he said. "Your drainage problem existed before the beautification work. We simply made the area presentable. There was no drainage problem before you filled the ditch." "Then prove it," he said. Then his voice turned colder. "And before you start threatening lawsuits, remember that the HOA has counsel. Most homeowners don't have the money or patience to fight something like this." That was the moment my anger went quiet. Because I understood what he was counting on. He thought I would get scared. He thought the fines would pressure me into accepting the damage. He thought a board title, an attorney's name, and a few official-looking notices would make me doubt my own property records. A week later, the second storm hit harder. This time, water came within inches of the back door. Outside, the decorative shrubs leaned sideways in the saturated ground, and the white gravel began washing across the yard. Then I noticed something strange. The water was no longer just pooling behind my house. It was backing up along the rear lots, creeping under fences, and spreading uphill in the wrong direction. I walked to the side gate and looked toward Martin Keller's property. His perfect lawn was beginning to shine under a layer of standing water. That should have been his warning. Instead, the next morning, I received a second HOA notice accusing me of allowing a nuisance condition to impact neighboring properties. Attached was a proposed fine schedule. That was when I stopped trying to reason with them. I did not call Martin again. I did not go to his house. I did not yell at the next HOA meeting. I did not grab a shovel and dig the ditch back out myself, even though every part of me wanted to. Instead, I started building a file. The first thing I did was save everything. I downloaded the backyard camera footage from the morning the landscaping crew arrived. I saved the clip of the compact loader dumping soil into the ditch, the workers spreading gravel, and Martin walking along the fence afterward like he owned the place. I backed it up twice and emailed a copy to myself with the date in the subject line. Then I photographed the yard from every angle. I took pictures of the filled ditch, the new gravel strip, the leaning shrubs, the water line on the garage floor, the rust on my tools, and the mud collecting against the slab. I used a tape measure in the photos so no one could claim I was exaggerating. After that, I printed every email from the HOA. The beautification notice, my reply with the survey attached, the message they ignored, the first violation notice, the second violation notice, Martin's smug replies. I put them all in order and highlighted every place where I warned them about the drainage easement before they touched it. Then I opened my old closing documents. The survey was exactly where I remembered it. Across the rear of my lot was a marked drainage easement, drawn in clean black lines. It ran behind my property, crossed two others, and continued toward the county storm drain near the lower road. It was not a suggestion. It was recorded. The next morning, I drove to the county records office. A clerk helped me pull the original subdivision plat, the stormwater management plan, and the recorded easement agreement. That was when I learned something important. The ditch behind my house was not just there to protect my yard. It was part of a drainage path designed for several uphill lots, including the row behind Martin Keller's property. If someone blocked it, the water would not disappear. It would spread, back up, and look for the next lowest place to go. I hired a licensed surveyor to mark the easement on the ground. 2 days later, he walked the rear property line with orange flags and GPS equipment. When he finished, the result was impossible to ignore. The HOA's new landscaping strip sat directly inside the recorded drainage easement. Then I called a drainage engineer. He inspected the yard after another rain and wrote a report stating that the fill material had obstructed the designed flow path. He noted that the gravel and soil had raised the grade, slowed runoff, and redirected water toward my garage and neighboring lots. Then came the sentence that changed everything. The flooding was consistent with obstruction of the easement, not lack of maintenance by the homeowner. I read that line 3 times. After that, I sent a public records request to the county permit office asking for any permit related to drainage modification on my property. The response was simple: no permit found. Then a neighbor quietly sent me the HOA meeting packet. The landscaping invoice described the job as rear lot beautification, ditch fill, gravel installation, shrub placement. They had written the mistake down themselves. By the end of that week, I had camera footage, emails, photos, survey flags, county records, an engineer's report, and proof that no permit had been issued. Martin had told me to prove it. So I did. But I was not going to prove it to him over the phone. I was going to prove it to people who could actually make him answer. The legal turn did not happen in a courtroom. It happened in a quiet county office, under fluorescent lights, when a clerk slid an old recorded agreement across the counter and said, "You may want to read Section 4. I had already seen the survey. I had already seen the plat map. I knew the ditch was real. But Section 4 made everything bigger than an HOA landscaping dispute. It said no private owner, association, board, contractor, or representative could obstruct, fill, alter, redirect, or reduce the capacity of the drainage easement without written county approval. Anyone who did could be held responsible for restoration costs, property damage, enforcement fees, and professional inspections. The HOA had not just made a bad decision. They had stepped onto private property, altered a recorded drainage easement, changed part of the subdivision's stormwater system, and then fined me for the flooding they caused. Even worse for Martin, the records showed the HOA did not own that strip of land. It was not common area. It was part of my lot, protected by a county drainage easement. I asked the clerk for certified copies of everything. Then I went home and wrote one final email to the HOA board. I attached the camera footage, the surveyor's report, the drainage engineer's letter, the county records, the no permit response, the photos of my flooded garage, and the invoice that literally said ditch fill. I gave them 10 days to remove the fill, restore the ditch, cancel both violation notices, and reimburse my documented damages and professional fees. Martin replied the next morning with one sentence. The board considers this matter closed. That sentence aged badly almost immediately. 2 nights later, a heavy storm sat over the neighborhood for hours. By midnight, water moved through the subdivision exactly the way the engineer said it would. But when it reached the buried ditch, it had nowhere to go. So it turned. It spread under fences, pushed across backyards, pooled around patios, and climbed into low spots that had never flooded before. Then it reached Martin Keller's perfect lawn. By sunrise, his backyard looked like a retention pond that had lost control of itself. His expensive sod floated in loose sheets. His stone patio was half underwater. His outdoor kitchen had standing water around the base cabinets. For the first time, the damage was not hidden behind my fence. It was visible from the street. Neighbors came outside in rain boots and stared. Someone asked Martin why the drainage ditch had been filled. He tried to blame me, saying I had failed to maintain my lot. But the water was not listening to his version of events. It was following gravity, and gravity had better evidence than the HOA. By Monday morning, the neighborhood was no longer arguing about curb appeal. It was arguing about flood damage. Martin's backyard still looked like a swamp, and the standing water had spread behind 3 other homes. The same people who had ignored my warnings were now taking pictures, calling insurance companies, and asking why the drainage path had been blocked. I did not say much. I sent my file to the county stormwater department, code enforcement, and my attorney. 2 days later, a county inspector arrived with a clipboard, a measuring wheel, and a calm expression that made Martin look nervous before anyone even spoke. The inspector walked the rear easement with the surveyor's flags still in place. He compared the plat map to the filled ditch, checked the slope, photographed the gravel strip, and asked who authorized the work. Martin tried to answer like he was running an HOA meeting. "We approved a beautification project," he said. "This homeowner refused to maintain the area properly." The inspector looked at the county records, then at the buried drainage channel. "This is not a beautification issue," he said. "This is a recorded drainage easement." The sidewalk went quiet. Code enforcement reviewed the documents, the camera footage, and the no permit response. Within an hour, the HOA received a written violation requiring them to restore the ditch and submit the work for county inspection. Then, my attorney sent the demand letter. It listed trespass, obstruction of a recorded easement, unpermitted drainage modification, wrongful fines, garage damage, surveyor fees, engineering fees, and legal costs. It also warned that if the HOA refused to comply, we would file for an injunction and damages. For once, Martin did not call me smug. He called the HOA lawyer. At the next public board meeting, the room was packed. Residents wanted to know why their dues might be used to pay for a project that should never have happened. Martin tried to blame the landscaping company, but the invoice said ditch fill, and the email showed he had approved it personally. By the end of the meeting, no one was talking about my ugly ditch anymore. They were talking about Martin's mistake. The HOA had 10 days to fix what they had buried. This time, they could not send a cheap landscaping crew with white gravel and decorative shrubs. They had to hire a licensed drainage contractor, submit a restoration plan to the county, and reopen the ditch exactly where it had been before. The contractor removed the soil, hauled away the gravel, cut the slope back down to grade, and rebuilt the channel under county inspection. It cost the HOA far more than their beautification project ever had. My violation notices were canceled. The fines disappeared from my account. Their insurance paid for the damage to my garage, the ruined storage boxes, and the cleanup. The HOA also reimbursed my surveyor, the drainage engineer, and part of my attorney's fees. Martin took the hardest fall. At the next election, residents did not forget the flooded yards, the emergency inspections, or the money wasted because one man hated the look of a legal drainage ditch. Martin tried to defend himself by saying he only wanted to improve the neighborhood. Someone from the back of the room said, "You turned it into a swamp." He lost his board seat that night. A month later, the ditch behind my house was ugly again, and I had never been so happy to see it. During the next storm, water flowed through it exactly the way it was supposed to. It moved along the property line, passed behind the fences, and disappeared into the county storm drain without touching my garage door. That sound was better than any apology Martin could have given me. In the end, I did not win because I shouted louder than the HOA. I won because I kept the emails, saved the footage, read the easement, and let the county records speak for me. So keep your survey. Keep your closing documents. Take pictures before anything changes. And if someone with a title tells you your property rights are just old paperwork, remember this story, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories about ordinary homeowners finally learning where their line really is.